As goons, we are obviously, well suited to natural, unscripted banter. It is what we're known for.
We are comedy posters on a comedy site.
Yep.
Is in our blood.
Our fertile history. Generations of internet posters stretching back long for our forefathers.
20 years.
20 years. I still cannot believe
years.
I've been reading this goddamn forum for 20 years.
Yep.
What am I doing with my life?
You're sat recording a podcast, so clearly you are succeeding.
I could be
20
eating
years.
cheesecake and watching my friends play Dragon Quest XI. Instead, I'm here with you.
I'm Xander. I didn't think of a funnier thing to say here. And with us tonight,
Hello, I am Sam. I am a games designer. I have been working in the games industry for about 11 years now. Very nice to meet you all.
I'm Jamie. I briefly
Hey, Sam.
dabbled in the games industry 18 years ago.
Hi, it's Natalie. They said that I could talk about either Brexit or video games, so obviously I'm here.
And I'm Kirby, and I'm as pink and round as my name suggests.
Perfect.
pretty pink, pretty round. Yeah, I've been in the industry myself in mostly QA capacity, some other weird specialised stuff. It's probably best not to go into. I imagine we've got stories. But I think we'll start today with quite major stories come out the last week or so. You may be aware of a game called Hearthstone. A popular streamer won a major event there, Blitzchung. I don't have his real name in the notes, I'm sorry. Took his... won a major tournament this last weekend. In conversation with the casters afterwards, brought up the matter of the crackdown happening in Hong Kong, indicating his support for the Hong Kong people against mainland China. So, yes, that's the major one this week. So, how was Blizzard's response to that now?
It was a shit show, basically.
A veritable shitstorm, even.
yes, that's a very good summation. They started by immediately disqualifying him, stripping him of his prize money that he'd rightfully earned, which is a bit weird. They suspended him for a whole year from Hearthstone competition as well. So obviously that's a very strong response. And
now, initially, was it more severe than that initially and wound down to that, or have they sort of backed off from that a bit?
It was initially a year. They have now rounded it down to 6 months due to the kind of level of response from the wider gaming community, which I think it's fair to say has been extensive.
Yes.
Mass cancellation
It's
of
not
accounts.
From what I've heard, 6 months is still pretty much... For where he is at his level, 6 months is still really too high because he's in the Grandmasters and being out of that for 6 months.
Yeah, he's like top of the game.
Yeah, he means he won't probably
that's
get
major
back,
income.
which is still utterly insane to me to do that. It's the whole thing is crazy. It's just wild. The response.
They also fired the casters as well.
Yeah,
That seemed kind of left field.
they
They literally hid under the desks.
Yeah.
They put their heads down and were like, "Oh God, we can't be involved in this," and they still fired them.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I don't think
let's
they've
be clear, they
rescinded
didn't
that, have
know. No, they haven't, and the casters didn't know that he was going to say that. They have no control over that situation, and they've still taken the complete full brunt of Blizzard's attempt to cow down to the Chinese government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what this all boils down to is their fear of the Chinese government.
Who, I mean, obviously, China is a massive market now, and indeed, Tencent owns, I believe, a 10% stake in Blizzard.
It's 5%.
Who are themselves a Chinese company.
From what I've read, in terms of actual revenue per year for Blizzard, China is only, not just China, but the whole arena of where China is only about 11% of their revenue, and China, they reckon, is about 6 or 7%. It's potential revenue they're worried about, ignoring all their actual current revenue everywhere else. They just think that China is the potential for this massive expansion into gaming, but they seem to forget that the way China operates is if something's good, they'll make their own copy of it and get rid of the original one. So them chasing China in this manner seems to be very self-defeatist.
It's indicative of the last 12 months of Blizzard. It's just been one long PR disaster and terrible decisions after another. I mean, you've got starting with the Diablo one, the announcement at the last BlizzCon. Don't you guys have phones?
Oh, dear.
And,
I mean, let's just kind of clarify that Diablo, a huge franchise, fans were all very excited because they thought the next mainline Diablo game was going to be announced, and instead Diablo turned around and announced Diablo Immortal, which is basically a mobile
It's actually a clone of a Chinese game, a reskin of a Chinese game that was terrible, by the way.
Oh, God.
I had to play that game for reference, by the way, and yes, it is actually horrendous.
Oh, dear.
I mean, then they basically, they cancelled the whole Heroes of the Storm Global Championship, a few years later, basically overnight putting out an entire community of casters and pro players out of a job. Then I think 2 months later, Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision Blizzard,
I remember him. He was fun.
Internally referred to as the Emperor occasionally. Record results in 2018, he said, and in the same announcement laid off 800 people at Blizzard.
Yeah.
And then I don't think there was anything for a while. Classic launched, and then this happened, basically. And then this is now just continuing, and they're just continuing to double down and saying, no, we will not be unbanning these players. They've
actually banned more players as well.
They banned. So they didn't ban immediately. So a couple of days later, there was this collegiate team of all white people, basically, who announced that they were in support of Hong Kong, and Blizzard did nothing.
They did cut the video stream.
But
they didn't ban them
later.
No, they didn't ban them at all at that point, and they didn't say anything about it. It was purely the Blitzchung, which was as if it couldn't be more blatant about why it was him and not them.
Yeah, and then they finally banned them, I think, yesterday?
So they gave them another 6 months, just like Blitzchung, and they've said, we welcome the 6 months, but this shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't be banned for this sort of thing.
I feel I should just say I believe Tencent owns 5% of Activision Blizzard. Maybe that actually check the notes on that. So probably best to clarify. I don't know. Let's not be technically libelous.
And of course, we have got the next BlizzCon in, is it a week or so, or 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's the end of October they do that.
I mean, they've already...
Yeah, it's going to be like the Conservatives conference all over again, right?
They have actually cancelled, I think it was an Overwatch or...
so Overwatch is launching, or I think just has launched.
On Switch.
It was the Switch. There was a Switch
do
event with the voice actors all to appear there and people to go and see them, and they've cancelled that in advance.
Which is quite funny because...
The voice actors are cool.
I mean, one of the voice actors, Elise Zhang, has tweeted in denial of the Uyghur genocide that China is currently committing, which is a bit iffy. Let's be fair.
Okay, I didn't know that when I said all the voice actors were cool. So
but most of them
the
are
thing
cool.
is, if she's living in China right now, I'm not sure how truthful she's allowed to be without possibly getting in trouble. So it might be a case of her siding with them, or it might be a case of, she is just denying genocide. I wouldn't want to make any aspersions on what the people in China have to do at this point in time in regards to their livelihood and their families. I have no idea. But what she has tweeted is pretty bad. She has said the people who break the law should go to prison and things like that, and not really thinking about what the law is that they are breaking. And it's not really that they're breaking a law, it's that they want to have a free Hong Kong.
Yeah. Although an upside of this is that fans have claimed her Overwatch character, May. They've claimed her as a figure in support of Hong Kong, and she's now all over the internet memes, as they were.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And she is a sturdy lady, turns to ice, very hard to move, very irritating design.
And because of this, because they've claimed her, if you go to the Blizzard site where you can buy merchandise, you cannot buy anything other than 4 bits of May merchandise, which are by third parties, not by Blizzard. They've removed it from the store.
Yeah, they cancelled a statue, I think.
Yeah, they did. They've removed it all. It's unbelievable.
That's why I don't play Overwatch, by the way. Why I quit was May, because I played it twice, and the second time I played it, the entire opposition team were Mays.
Okay, that wasn't a regular game mode, but yeah. So she can. There is a potential there for her to go a bit nuts.
All I remember was ice and pain and giggling.
No, she'll do that thing where she'll freeze you to the spot, and then they could just leisurely point the gun in your face and shoot an icicle into your brain.
A lot
and
like Boris
you can just
Johnson.
sort of see it turtle heading out of the gun. You really can.
It's a lot like being in the games industry, really.
One thing I will say for Overwatch is that oftentimes we see a story come up about the matter of loot boxes in games, and just about like 80-90% of those, the thumbnail will be a picture of an Overwatch loot box, which I think is kind of unfair, because I don't feel that the loot box system in Overwatch specifically is that predatory or anything. But it does allow us to segue into matters of the economic model behind a lot of games, microtransactions. What are microtransactions, Randy Pitchford? Subscription models, matters like that. So, what do you guys think of how our games are being paid for nowadays?
Fuck loot boxes, first and foremost.
I mean, it depends. It depends very much on the game. There's some of them where it is especially egregious, and there's some where it's less egregious, and then there's some where it's kind of like a weird mix. So I know a game that came out recently was the new Ghost Recon. I'm going to call it Wildlands, but it's not called Wildlands.
It's the sequel to Wildlands.
Well, isn't it like Breakpoint or something?
Punisher in it.
Hang on,
Breakpoint,
I'll look it up.
yes. It was Breakpoint.
Oh. Hey, go me.
That came out, and that got an absolute ton of flack from all corners for the microtransactions and people decrying it as pay to win. And I have played more of it than I'm willing to admit in public, and it is not pay to win at all. You
Should we just explain how pay to win works for people?
Yeah,
who
so
aren't
pay to win
familiar
is the
with
idea
games?
that the game experience is purposefully degraded, so that you then encourage to buy the missing pieces, or in a competitive arena, you can buy items or advantages that increase your likelihood of winning, so that people who spend money do better at the game. But with Breakpoint, the microtransactions are just completely ignorable. You wouldn't even notice they were there unless you went looking for them. There's so much stuff. There's a few cosmetics you have to pay for, but for the most part, you get like tons of currency in game, even though you can buy currency. You get tons of cosmetics. You get like endless weapons, loot. You level up fast. There's nothing there, but at the same time, so it's not really. You can ignore the microtransactions entirely, and it feels kind of wrong to describe it as pay to win. But at the same time, the base version of the game costs 60 fucking quid, so they've got no business putting any kind of microtransaction in on top of that.
Agreed.
No matter how, and it feels, in a way, it feels kind of worse because it's not there and it's not front and center and it's not being like shoved at you, because a lot of companies just sort of constantly like point out and hammer at you to try and get you to spend money, and this feels more sort of like it's there and
they don't feel the need to promote it because they just know there are some people who won't have the willpower to resist and will spend money on stuff that they totally don't need to. And it feels predatory in a different way for that reason.
It is just
a lot
naked
of games.
greed.
Yeah. I mean,
a lot of games now, are using random elements. EA were calling them surprise mechanics, where it's
fucking EA.
Lovely euphemism. Where in a game like Apex Legends, instead of being for the most part being able to buy whatever you please with cosmetics, you have to just keep rolling dice until you might get what you want, or get a very small amount of the currency that you can use to do so. So if you want to sort of actualize yourself in the game the way you want, you do have to just chance it out, really, because with no real alternative, and it is not something that matters. You can just get the same game experience without putting any money in at all. But it is still, this is the way the addictive part of your mind works. If something's put in your reach and you know that if you invest enough into it, the more you invest with, the greater the chance you get it. The more likely you are to just incrementally give a little and a little and a little until you've possibly spent more than the cost of a standard retail game, rolling dice and possibly not getting the thing you're after.
Absolutely. And in terms of you saying about, is Apex Legends EA?
Yes.
So,
it's derived from Titanfall.
So in terms of EA, they're probably one of the worst for pay-to-win mechanics, in that if we talk about Battlefront in a moment, the whole loot boxes and microtransaction stuff, I think it sort of started with Team Fortress 2, which isn't EA, that's Valve. They're the ones who sort of made it more approachable. But in terms of pay-to-win mechanics and insane amounts of profit, I think for one of their games, I think it was something like the last time I read was £793 million of profit a year.
I think
was
that'll
the
be the FIFA
Ultimate Team, which is pay to win. You get
FIFA
better
is
cards,
brutal.
and they make them. The players you get from those cards, if they have higher stats, they are better than people who've got that same card with lower stats. And the fact that those cards don't exist when the next FIFA game comes out, or when you're actually playing FIFA with those cards, they can get injured and then you've lost that card forever, and you have to keep buying more FIFA Ultimate players to continue your great team is disgusting, because knowing the people who buy FIFA are going to be mostly the kids and people who like football games, and they don't really play as much other games because FIFA is their yearly purchase, and that this is mostly an EA thing, because of obviously Battlefront 2 had pay-to-win transactions as well that got removed, got the game completely... what was the word? What happened to it? It had to disappear for a bit, and they had to gut it all out because they weren't making money off a Star Wars licensed game, something that should make money straight away just for being Star Wars, and they couldn't do it with that game. They had to remove the systems, but they're notorious for their pay to win. I think they're Andrew Riccitello, I think that's his name. I can't remember how to pronounce it properly.
I think it was Riccitello.
Yeah, didn't he have a conference where he talked about maybe people having to buy ammo for their guns because they're in the heat of the game and they just need to continue to play and do really, really well, and that might be the end point for them. And it's just and it's EA. I mean, it's what they do. They are horrible.
Sort of living down to expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, EA were literally voted like the worst company to work for in America in one recent year.
Was it 3 years running? I mean, yeah, there's obviously worse companies than EA, but the fact that they won and they beat some really awful people is it just goes to how much the games are disliking them.
And I think while we're talking about pay to win, it's worth mentioning that cosmetic stuff alone, even though it's not pay to win and it's viewed as not as bad, it can still have serious negative consequences. So supposedly now in primary schools, default is an insult.
Yeah.
And it's used against children who can't afford to buy any skins when they play Fortnite.
I have heard that.
Fancy
Yes.
trainers, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think any
my-
sort of loot boxes should exist, really. Not even.
Yeah,
I don't even
yeah.
think cosmetics are okay, because it's the idea of
Yeah,
somebody
but-
having something that you can't get without spending money. It's not right. Not in
So
this
I've
age
got
of
a
media.
question. I've got a
think
question here.
Sorry.
Yeah,
go on.
I've got a question here. So, for loot boxes, you are paying a certain amount of money for some kind of physical reward of varied value, which you don't know what it's going to be. Is this gambling?
Yes.
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 But there are
Yeah.
multiple
Material
types of
value,
loot
yeah.
boxes and multiple types of gacha within that. So gacha comes from gachapon, which is essentially those machines in Japan that you get like a little ball, you put some money in, you get a ball with a toy in it, and you don't know what toy it's going to be. That's where it all started. So this all comes from Asian video games originally. It was originally from It's a very tricky thing to talk about. So full disclosure, this is my job. This is what I do. My specialist as a games designer is in monetization. So I spend all day arguing with people about the morality and the ethics of loot boxes. And it's very tricky because on one hand you have a publisher that says this is how you need to do it. You need to meet these targets. And you can make a video game that does all of the most predatory, most horrific, most awful practices that targets vulnerable people, and you can completely fail and make no money. So no publisher in that kind of power differential relationship is necessarily willing to let you be moralistic or ethical about it when you say, oh, we shouldn't put in so much, because you have to then come up with a competing system that you say, this is a much fairer system, and they'll say, yes, but it will make like 50% less money, so why would you do that? Because guess what? Capitalism. Yeah.
I don't think we can criticise capitalism because we buy games with money.
We all live in a society.
Damn, I forgot about that. I exist in a society which makes use of money as well. Damn it.
One thing that always gets me when people talk about loot boxes is they say it's not gambling. Obviously gambling's terrible, and it would be horrific if children were gambling in games. But it's not gambling because you don't get any real world. You never get any real world money back, as if that somehow makes it better.
Yeah.
No,
The
you're
fact
just
that
chucking your money
just
in the
gambling,
well.
but you can never win.
Well, what just happened in the Netherlands and Belgium is a while ago, they banned loot boxes if you can trade the rewards with other player, because then that
gives them value.
Yeah.
that gives them value. But now as far as I'm aware, even if you can't do that, they flat out banned some games with loot boxes. The new Pokemon mobile game came out in the Netherlands, didn't come out in the Netherlands and Belgium because it has loot boxes. End of. And this is what I'm actually using as an argument in like day to day is, look, regardless of whether they make more money or not, times are changing. This is toxic to the community. There is no good way to do this, to charge people money for stuff in video games when you fundamentally have young children playing these games with their parents' credit cards. You cannot add something like this and just say and have it be done ethically.
Yeah.
So if we don't legislate ourselves as an industry, it will happen for us, and honestly, it's already happening for us. By the time a game that's in development now comes out in 2, 3, 4 years' time, the landscape will be completely different. And so even from a business sense, you actually have to start looking at this. So even if you don't give a shit about the ethics, you have to start looking from a capitalist perspective at changing these systems to something else. The problem is I'm seeing, is the resolutions of this, the answers to this, are just to like invert the gacha. So it's a box that's already open, and then it has a 10-minute timer that you can pay money to refresh. So it's just abstracting it one layer away from that, and it ends up being the same thing. It's just slightly more obfuscated, and people don't quite notice it easily. Like, for example, no one really complains about drop tables in MMOs. They're essentially loot boxes. Now, World of Warcraft has tokens that let you re-roll for loot on a boss. If they did that in World of Warcraft and will let you buy those tokens for real money, people would lose their goddamn minds. In multiple Asian MMOs, that's just the standard, and no one cares. And it's just all about context and where you are, and it's very tricky doing it.
I'm not sure any Asian MMOs last long enough for it to become an issue anyway.
Possibly true. Although there are a few that are doing pretty well still. I have to pick the name because I can't remember any of the damn names.
And have you heard what they've done to loot boxes in CS:GO in France?
Do
I
tell.
was just trying to remember what it was, because I know exactly what you were about to say, and I couldn't remember which game it was, but yeah.
They now have, this is only in France at the moment, but I'm guessing it's gonna, if the law in Belgium goes through the EU and eventually translates to all countries in the EU, so they have a thing called an X-ray scanner, which is in the inventories now in France. And what it does, it shows the contents of one of their loot boxes before you buy a key to open it. Anytime you have a case that drops in game, you have to put it in the scanner first, but you must claim the item. You cannot scan each box. You have to scan them one at a time. You can only take the scanner off of that box if you buy it properly and take the item out, whatever the item might be. So it's, once you've done it once with the free scanner, you're technically paying for it each time. So it's that's
what I'm talking about. It's obfuscating it by one layer.
Yeah.
It's not actually fixing the problem, which is what capitalism is amazing at.
And it's ridiculous. And
it makes me so fucking angry.
it's just I can't stand loot boxes. And
So
we should have realised this would happen with horse armour. We really should have seen this coming.
But the most bought item in the entirety of Oblivion's history, still making money to this day. I shit you not.
I don't know how.
How are people still playing Oblivion?
People are still buying the fucking horse armour.
I thought it looked rough when it came out, to be honest. There's a reason that everyone keeps reinstalling Skyrim. Which they put out on everything still.
Yeah.
That Dave Chappelle sketch is the best.
I minority opinion here, but I absolutely loathe Skyrim.
Why?
I love it too. It's just, it had its heyday, and then I played 250 hours of it, and you kind of.
I didn't even get that far. I think I had three playthroughs stopped by show-stopping bugs, and then on the fourth one I was trying to play Conjurer, and the first dragon attack I was like hiding under a bridge, summoning knives while the dragon flew around roasting guards, and I just thought, the fuck am I doing? I'm not enjoying any part of this.
I'm really, really bad at video games. I play every game on easy if I can, and I take forever to play games. And I've got about 400 odd hours in Skyrim, and I have never gotten to the point where I have to pick a side in the story. I have one save game, and I've explored the entirety of the southeast of the map.
How?
But I just haven't gone further than that. I get lost. I
end up just that big.
Well, this is what happens to me. I'm bad at games. I'm very bad at video games.
So am I. I make them. It's a prerequisite. You have to be terrible at them.
Well, anyway, there's obviously we were talking about microtransactions and loot boxes and stuff. But another way games are getting paid for is whereby getting exclusivity deals. So sort of getting them subsidized by platforms like Epic Store, Steam. That's sort of something that's come up recently. That Epic Store is still fairly new and is aggressively securing a lot of exclusivity deals. Borderlands 3 was particularly. There was a lot of people very vocal about that, but it still became Take-Two's biggest seller of recent years, so possibly didn't really materialise.
Well,
but a lot of people were insisting they'd be waiting 6 months for the Steam release.
I mean, it's like that classic image of the Steam group for Boycott Modern Warfare 2.
And
everyone in the Steam group was playing Modern Warfare 2.
Yeah.
I mean, in that particular instance, I feel that Steam was approaching becoming a sort of de facto monopoly on the PC. In this particular instance, I don't see a particular problem with Epic giving people money and it's for 6 months. It's not like in perpetuity.
Like, there's a lot of good things about having Epic as a competitor to Steam, because the way Steam have been approaching their business in the last few years, is just ridiculous. There's
Yeah.
no video game curation, so you wind up with like these skeevy porn games just kind of like available.
People gaming the algorithms, and there's not. New developers aren't able to get noticed.
There's always a sort of like pile of edgelord shit on Steam as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
All I can say is thank God for Jim Sterling.
Yeah. I mean, the Epic Store thing, it's good that there's finally some competition.
What about Origin, man? Why won't anyone think of Origin?
I mean, we all try not to.
Yeah, no, it's
Origin, of course, being
Origin is
EA's
horrible.
video game platform.
Yeah.
The Epic Store should have a lot more than what it does currently have. There are some really weird things missing, like
It's kind
having
of
a
their
basket.
bug. I think a lot of it will come in time.
They probably should have got that
demands of
stuff
competitors.
first, though.
Yeah, and,
Like,
and also
possibly.
buying things for the Unreal Engine is more like Steam than the actual Epic Games Store is like Steam, which is the weird part. So like you can't, there's no such thing as a basket on the Epic Games Store. You have to buy games one at a time, and
Yes.
you know something like that really should have been in the original part of it. When it's on their on the Unreal Store, when they have to buy bits for your Unreal Engine, when they've got that in place already, and it uses technically the same backends. Why? It's,
I didn't have to install it because I already had the Unreal Engine front end.
It doesn't make much sense that's such a crucial, especially when they have a sale. You're going to buy more than one game, most likely. And I heard some people losing their access to their credit cards because it looked like dodgy purchases. They would keep buying a game after a game after a game.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
another issue as well, a lot of the games that Epic get exclusivity with, they have been crowdfunded, because that's a very kind of popular model for indie developers.
Yes.
And when these games are crowdfunded, this all took place before the Epic Game Store was even a thing. So obviously this was all promised out through Steam, because that's where you go. So you pay money for the game, you're promised a Steam key in return, but then a bit later the developers turn around and say, okay, we've signed this exclusivity deal with Epic, we're not going to be releasing on Steam, so you don't get a Steam key. And obviously at the end of the day you can get the game through Epic, but considering the issues with the storefront, it does, it's not giving customers what they signed up for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The biggest name of that was Shenmue 3, where they had literally asked people, what platform do you want this on? Sony, Xbox, or Steam. They were saying Steam, and when they said, no, we're going to go to Epic, about 2 weeks later, they said, okay, fine, can I have a refund? They were saying, no refunds. It took people complaining for them to actually go, okay, fine, we're sorry, we'll give you a refund for the game. But it shouldn't have come down to that. It should have been an automatic thing. Oh, that's not the platform you wanted, here's your money back.
Yeah. I mean, I think developers taking money to do an exclusive, I think it depends on the developer. I think if they're an indie developer, then I back them 100%. It's like, it's going to upset some gamers that have maybe given them money in hope of a Steam release, and that the Steam release is delayed or whatever. But if you're an indie developer, things are so uncertain that if Epic are going to give you like a ton of money up front, you should just take it and not feel guilty about it. But if it's like a AAA company, or you know what I mean, or a larger publisher, and they're just taking the money because free money, I think that's like, there's no need for, do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
The game was going to come out.
Shenmue's in an odd space there, because it is or was Sega, and it was announced at a Sony press conference for whatever reason.
It was,
so it's been kind of all over the place. I don't know what the ins and outs are of its actual ownership, but obviously it's an odd look to announce a crowdfunding campaign on Sony's stage.
I think it was a mixture
that kind of just smacks of them realizing that people really want that game, and there's a market for that game, but they can also like get people to give them the money up front.
It's a lot like what Ubisoft
they can
are
eat
doing.
the cake and have it.
It's a lot like what Ubisoft are doing with Beyond Good and Evil 2. But rather than asking for money, they are asking for artwork. They have essentially set up a program to crowdsource fans to design textures and kind of graphics and such for the game, but so that they don't have to do the work themselves, and they're not going to compensate anybody who
this
gets...
is with the kid off of Third Rock from the Sun, isn't it?
I do not get that reference.
Yeah, no, I just realised, you're possibly not all the same age as me.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt runs a company that's just dedicated to sort of getting people to do work on spec.
Yeah, so I don't know the full thing, but it's pretty dodgy to speculatively do work and possibly get paid. There's a lot of that going around in the industry, of course.
It nicely segues us onto Chucklefish.
Oh, that is a good segue. I like it.
It's almost like we know what we're doing.
I wouldn't say
it's
that.
It's not, we don't, but at least we make it look that way. Anyway, who was going to chat about Chucklefish?
Yeah, so I will. I'm going to add it to the notes. So Chucklefish are a publisher / developer. They're most famous for publishing Stardew Valley, which is entirely one person making the whole of it, but they're the ones who published it for him. But they have their own game called Starbound, which is a bit like a science fiction futuristic version of Terraria.
Which is a bit like Minecraft, which is...
yeah,
2D-esque, but with boss battles and other cool stuff.
Yeah. And
Starbound isn't, but Terraria is.
Yeah, Terraria is definitely better than Starbound because of the way Starbound has been over the years, how it started and where it currently is, in that they had an idea to make a futuristic Terraria, and they had a game that was fun, but the people they'd actually hired lots of interns for their company, a lot of them quite young, 16-year-old, and they got them just to work for free with the prospect of perhaps giving them some
exposure.
Yeah, that's the word, exposure at a later point. And when they've actually had them come back and say, I'd like compensation for all the hundreds of hours of work I did on it, they've turned around and said, no, you got work in the industry and everything. There's been a couple of weird things they've done in regards to how they've kept the IP going. In that there's a very popular mod, which the person who runs it will take other people's mods, incorporate into their own one, and then refuse to remove them. And Chucklefish have pretty much let that happen. They don't seem to understand that this is people's time that they've worked on these mods themselves, and they're just being gobbled up by someone with a much larger community. And the way they handle Starbound and the way they handle people playing it and everything is always been quite, you'll do what we say and that's it. There's no sort of a community outreach to it, and the exposure stuff for the young interns is probably one of the worst parts about how the game was made. I think they also had a lot of pixel art that was actually from other games as placeholder art and forgot to remove it. I think it was either that or I'm pretty sure it was Starbound that did that. I'm not 100% certain. So
I think it was Terraria, actually.
Oh, was that the one that had the Final Fantasy?
Had Final Fantasy sprites in it earlier.
My mistake. My mistake. I knew it was one of the pixel 2D creation things. But the fact that they had all these interns, and there's a lot of people that did thousands of hours of work on systems that they never actually installed in the game and refused to compensate them for. I know a couple of them from the forums, in fact. Some of them working on their own games now, using what they've learnt with Chucklefish and Starbound. But the fact that they did all this work and they refused to give them any sort of compensation other than potential exposure or just flat out ignoring them is sort of indicative of a lot of companies that exist nowadays. The whole idea of exposure for work rather than monetary compensation for the hours put in. It seems to be a trend.
It's often the way that in the industry that a lot of people, and it works, are expected to feel honoured, privileged to just be involved in any way, even if it's for very little money, for no money, for working extremely antisocial hours, things like that. There is, of course, a number of serious issues regarding workers' rights within the industry. And because of people's dedication to games, because games are part of their identity, perhaps, it's very easy for a lot of people to be exploited. Obviously, this manifests most commonly within the industry in the form of crunch, where people will be clocking in a substantial amount of overtime to make often quite unrealistic targets that allow games to be churned out probably faster than they should be. This is why often things are rushed. This is why people burn out of the industry. I mean, this is something I could speak to myself from my own experience. I've worked in the industry in QA, particularly publisher side, where the expectation was often. I mean, for starters, I was on a night shift. The space available meant they were cycling 3 shifts. So
you basically got 24-hour QA. I take it.
Yes,
going round
almost.
the clock.
I was working 4 shifts a week for the price of 5. The premium for working night, but that doesn't offset the fact that your body clock's getting messed up. You don't know if I'm waking up. Do I eat lunch? Do I eat breakfast? Do I eat dinner? What the hell's going on? What do I do at weekends? Do I keep on this same schedule? It messes you up, obviously.
Yeah.
That's quite an extreme example. But yeah, when overtime comes up, and the very strong expectation is that you'll be working Saturday, Sunday, and you'll get a pizza, and
if you're lucky, you might just get some sandwiches.
But you feel valued because you got pizza. It kind of works, and a lot of people abide by it because they get to work in games.
And there is such a big kind of just supply of people who want to work in games that staff members are easily replaceable, which is kind of part of why they are abused so much, is that any complaint you make, they'll just get rid of you. There'll be somebody else who wants, is there to take your spot.
I will say that's true at the low end, but there is a huge problem of a drought of talent at the mid to high end in the industry, simply because of how rough this is, and people just burn out and leave. And I mean, even as far as 5 years into the industry, I was still doing stupid shit like working. I was working at one point in London for a company based in London, so on GMT, with programmers in San Diego, so 8 to 9 hours behind, and programmers in Mongolia, so 8 to 9 hours ahead. So basically, my entire job was 24 hours. There was no respite. I got to sleep, and then my company there was a startup. We rented a house in London. They gave us rooms upstairs and built an office in the basement. It was a wonderful commute for London, but I literally would come down in my dressing gown, have the office cat on my lap, and work for 14 to 20 hours sometimes.
Is it an office cat or is it a house cat in that situation?
At that point, it's a house cat. I guess. Well, it was the neighbour's cat, and it just moved in because we kept feeding it.
Okay, so they didn't actually get the cat. A cat was adjacent.
The cat was adjacent. It became my cat, and I took it with me in the end, but I digress.
Okay, so you stole a cat. Okay.
We stole a cat. The neighbours gave it to us. Very clear on this. It was a gacha cat. No, but you feel pressured to do this stuff because if games are a passion for you, which honestly for most people in the games industry, I'd say 90% they are, because you could get so much more money and much better hours and better just quality of life in the tech industry with the same skills that you generate in games. Unless you're a games designer like me, in which case I'm doomed to do this till I retire, basically. But you feel like you ought to, and even the crunch is never mandatory, but there's always this sort of hidden thread of, it's Gold Master, the build's failed, we better, stay here a bit later. And like before the stream, we were comparing the longest shifts we'd ever done, and my longest shift was
disappointed to find mine wasn't longest.
A Gold Master build that just wouldn't compile and kept failing at the last minute, and being sleep deprived at 27 hours into a shift, having the producers discuss, is it really important that the PlayStation Xbox builds talk to each other?
I did on one occasion, I think I was about an hour and a half late leaving, because we needed repeated new builds from the developer, changing the S in PlayStation on the splash screen to a capital letter, which is a requirement of it's in their technical requirements list, but for copyright reasons, that has to be a capital S. It took 4 builds.
Oh, Jesus.
Whoa.
And sometimes builds will take hours as well. So it's not like you're working or doing anything productive. You'll often just be sitting there, maybe just downloading files from a server or waiting for Perforce, a file management system, to sync. And you're just sitting there going, well, wait for 4 hours for the next build to come in, and I have to stay awake, and I have to do it. And it's really problematic because without unions, without anything like this, there's no recourse for this. And generally, up until the last few years, even mentioning unions is you get fired, you're done. And this is indicative of the game.
This is a really good segue.
Okay, before we segue, I'd just like to. Sorry, I'd just like to point out how pervasive this is within the video game industry, because it's not just one or two isolated incidents that you guys have had bad experiences. We're talking about companies like Rockstar, for example, who make Red Dead Redemption 2 and Grand Theft Auto Online, which are billion-dollar games. We're talking...
Yeah, GTA 5 is still making money.
Yeah, it's just introduced a casino, which is basically loot boxes.
Yeah. GTA 5 is the game that has made the most money of any video game in the history of the planet, actually. It is the most
it keeps showing up in the charts.
Yeah.
So,
if they...
I can tell you why at some point.
GTA 5 as well has a really... To sort of loop back to what we were saying at the start about pay-to-win, GTA 5 has one of the worst monetization systems in my experience.
Do you know why they get away with it, though? Why no one really cares that much? Because they separated all of the monetization out of the core game into the online mode.
Yeah.
So you pay $60 for the game. I've been so Americanized. $60, 60 quid for the game, and you basically get your single player mode. It has no monetization, nothing in it, and then there's an online mode with completely separate economy, separate everything, and that has all of the pervasive insidious shit in it, but no one cares.
Yeah, but the online stuff,
it was awful.
It has all sorts of stuff in where you can set up sort of criminal enterprises, and so you can set up drug labs and all these different crime operations. And you have to maintain them, and so you'll have to drive around and deliver the drugs once every so often when the labs have produced enough. And the way that works is you're always in the shittiest, most horrendous vehicle ever that you can't outrun anyone in it. It's got no defenses, but you've got to drive it all over the map. And as soon as you start delivering it, it highlights your position to everyone else in your online session. And they can come and kill you to get money, and then they sell tons of just elaborate vehicles the way you can just fly around on a rocket bike or a jump jet and just destroy people. And so they basically just sort of sucker in all the people who want to do I want to build a crime empire, and I'm gonna deliver me meth across the valley or whatever. And then while they're trying to do that, they're just being preyed on by all the people who drop real money to fly the car from Back to the Future, but with a rocket launcher attached to the front.
I mean, can I pay money to deliver my drugs in that vehicle, or am I stuck whenever I do?
No, you're stuck with this shit van and everyone knowing where you are at all times.
See, that's where they're going wrong. They could make even more money. I'm going to shut up now.
They've just got a casino.
This is the thing, especially with online games, which are always kind of growing and always changing. So with kind of GTA Online or the game as a service model, where you buy the game but it's constantly updating. So things like Fortnite, like Apex Legends, like Anthem, BioWare's recent massive failure. These are games, because they're constantly bringing out new content, the developers for these games are basically always in crunch. You don't get any kind of downtime for that kind of game, which is kind of just a huge abuse of workers' rights.
I'll say from my personal experience, so not standard for the games industry, usually the live services team is a different team to the development team. But live service is hell in AAA unless it's done right, and that's very hard to do because you have to ship content on a set period of time. You have to do it regularly. You can't miss a deadline, and it has to work. And it's like normally mobile is more used to this because I've been working in the mobile industry for 6 years. I've just switched to AAA, and mobile, we're used to incredibly quick, iterative development, 2-week sprints. A sprint is basically a period of work that you do with a set amount of tasks in it. You deliver content on a very short schedule, and you're used to, say, delivering 10 levels for a match 3 game or something, and then you say, okay, every 2 weeks, another 10 levels, every 2 weeks, and it's much smaller scope. In the AAA industry, you're used to taking 3 to 5 years to develop a game where no one says no to anything. Oh, we're going to localize into 50 languages? Oh, we're going to translate all of those and do voice acting? Yeah, we'll just get 50 voice acting in 50 different languages for voice acting. Let's do it. That's AAA. We'll just pay for it. It's fine. If you put that into a live service game, no one can cope because you've got hundreds of thousands of interconnecting parts that you simply can't QA and can't do without bugs, and they're trying to do the same schedule as mobile. And that leads to ridiculous crunch and hours, especially if it's a game that the people who are working on it are passionate about. It's rife for abuse. And it's really sad. It's really hard to avoid as well. It's something that the industry is wrestling with everywhere.
Yeah, I think Fortnite recently got accused of that, didn't it? Because obviously Fortnite being the biggest online game at the moment, constantly is updating it and adding new stuff. And they're, like Natalie said, always in crunch because they have to keep bringing things out for it.
Yeah, and you can't stop. And the thing is every time live ops is not. Normally games have a thing called a tail, right? So you launch a game, you get a big peak of revenue at the beginning on, say, a standard game that's $60 or whatever. And then you have a drop-off, and depending on the amount of marketing you do, that determines the length of your tail. So you sell less and less units over time. Live operations or games as a service, it's not linear. It's exponential in the other way, basically. And so you constantly grow your revenue month on month until you're making absolutely obscene sums of money for a single company, where you're making 50 million a month on a single IP with a team of only 100 people.
Yeah, the way these games are judged as well, it's they're games where the success is judged on that exponential growth. So you can have a game like Anthem, which started out as one of the biggest kind of games of the year in terms of its initial sales. But then because nobody wanted to keep playing it, all of that extra income just dropped off. So it still ends up coming out as a massive financial failure because of how it's been budgeted.
And they really couldn't afford that after Mass Effect Andromeda, just an absolute stinker. And yeah, as you say, with the intention of doing it live, it's too late. It's too late to be adding stuff to it. The water's tainted.
Honestly, actually, that's not necessarily true. It's never too late to add live ops to a game. You can always work on it because you can. The problem is with these companies is they have these expectations of making a billion-dollar game. Essentially, is what they want. And if they don't hit that, they'll cancel it and move on to the next one. Whereas I've worked on multiple games where you can slowly grow them over 6 months to 2 to 3 years and actually make an enormous profit off them compared to the development resources. But it's this crisis of scale that the AAA industry has, where everything has to basically be the next Fortnite or it's a failure.
Yeah. I think the new Tomb Raider did something like 200 million, and that was classed as a failure because it didn't hit something like 500 million. But it was never going to do the same amount of money as an online games as a service game because it was purely a storyline-based game, which was a one-and-done sort of thing.
Yeah, there's often these arbitrary targets. Like there's Metacritic, where people need to hit a particular rating at a particular time in order to get sequels commissioned, to get bonuses, which just results in the system getting gamed with review codes not going out to everyone. They just try to game it so they get broadly positive reviews and artificially somewhat have a high score. You were saying that.
Yeah, and yes, in terms of Metacritic and gaming the system, the other big way that they do it is companies like Activision. They just don't put in the microtransactions until the reviews are already done and the bonus is already won. Things like Call of Duty, obviously a huge franchise. The remaster for Crash Team Racing, they put in loot boxes kind of like a month after the game had been released. Just because they knew they could.
Yeah, it's the next viable tactic. Is essentially you do your initial launch for your premium price, and then you add free-to-play elements and monetization several months down the line when the hubbub has died down, and then you grow it as a service game, as a completely different product, essentially. And I have a hard time arguing with that, honestly, if it's done right, but it's never done right. Ever.
I suppose Fortnite is the ultimate example of that, because what we think of as Fortnite is in fact a spin-off from a co-op zombie game.
Yeah,
but
Fortnite
that's been buried now. And Fortnite Battle Royale, or I forget the proper name, which is still in early access. Let's remember now it's going into Chapter 2. Is of course a roaring success. But I don't know. I assume they get some benefit from saying it's a pre-release for some reason. Rosa missed a chance at a segue there. Could one of you keep saying tail again?
Tail.
Well, speaking of tail, let's not forget about Telltale.
Oh, I love
that's
that.
a really good
That was
segue.
so slick.
Yeah, it would have been great like 5 minutes ago, right? But yeah, we'd have missed the chat. It's fine. But yeah, obviously Telltale was developer of some renown, obviously doing a lot of licensed games, and it's another example of maybe management not respecting the workers enough in a number of ways, accepting a massive amount of workload. All of these licenses, a couple of Batman games, Tales of the Borderlands,
The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, Guardians of the Galaxy. They had about like 6 to 8 licensed games that they were meant to be making all at the same time. Which
Minecraft
sounds,
story
mode.
Yeah, real weird stuff. But yeah, but obviously, ultimately, it was unsustainable for as successful as they were. As
I mean, you say that.
Chris,
my understanding
accepted most of the games were?
My understanding is that The Walking Dead Season 1 was very successful, but apart from that, none of their games at all ever really shifted any major numbers.
Really?
Yeah, I suppose I got a bunch of them on sales.
Yeah.
I got Batman and Tales of the Borderlands on sales or in bundles.
Yeah.
For very little, quite some time after they came out, which is obviously not desperately helpful to developers.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not the same as buying them second hand, but I think I got a couple of them on PS Plus.
Both those you just said you would have gotten on PS Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's why what happened, really.
Yeah, but obviously it's not the people at the top that really lose out. A lot of people lost their jobs, and more recently, the company's assets have been bought up. And I think some former employees are being offered their jobs back temporarily.
It's to finish up the final, because for Walking Dead Season 4, which is the final one, and this is a game that's released in chapters, so you have a little bit of content released every few months, so you pay for each chapter. The company went bust when Chapter 2 of 5 was about to come out, but they had this contract to finish the game, so they have taken back a limited number of staff so that they can get the final part of The Walking Dead kind of knocked out. But that's essentially it. And I also think we should also highlight when they did fire their staff, this was landed on them as a big shock, and they were given 30 minutes to get all their things and leave the building.
At least they were let back in the building.
You'd have been forgiven for thinking things were basically sustainable there. That obviously business was coming in.
Yeah.
So obviously that's not something that you should have to be expected to respond to so quickly. Yeah, it's not great.
No.
Games industry, not great. But to return to our abortive segue of earlier, the idea of unionisation is something that's rearing its head now for the first time in the industry. Games Workers Unite was formed, I believe, December last year, and is making its presence felt with this issue that's come up with Us 2, I think, the last couple of weeks, where a active union member there was, basically sacked for, trying to spread. I guess spread. I'm not too up on the particulars of it, because obviously there's a number of stories out there. But it seems that he was sacked for talking up unionisation within the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the reason that they gave, and it was very clear that was the reason. They didn't even try to hide it.
If I can just read off of the Games Workers Unite front page, because they have a list here, and it's if you have not seen this, you should. It's just 74% of game workers are not paid overtime, but 90% could be expected to work extra hours. 53% of game workers believe their skill sets could secure better wages and conditions in another industry. Probably more, actually, just half afraid to admit it.
It's probably 100%, honestly. Yeah. I took QA experience and I'm working in tech, so it's... Yeah.
It gets more insidious. 45% of women feel they have or will at some stage encounter barriers to their career progression because of their gender. It is a nightmare trying to get women games designers, because after... I don't know many with more than 5 years experience, because after 5 years they just go, you know what, fuck this, and leave.
Yeah.
45% of women have experienced some form of bullying or harassment while working in games or by being associated with the industry.
How many of these have worked for Riot Games?
Well, they're all managing new projects now, so that's fine.
And 2/3 of all games companies worldwide do not have any mechanisms in place to deal with harassment or abuse. It is awful. My wife is also a games designer, and the fucking stories she could tell you guys, it's really bad as well. Just you notice it in the games industry when you'll find that there are any women in the office. You just see this sort of orbit of guys around them half the time, just constantly just chatting to them. It is the weirdest, most unprofessional, nasty underbelly of the industry, that the women are treated like shit. They're paid less. They are constantly dealing with harassment, and most of them eventually don't put up with it. And this is a huge problem for making actual good games, is you don't get minorities in charge, you don't get women in charge, and it makes the industry worse.
I think it's worth pointing out as well that that's not just a problem on the professional side of things. I think all of those problems are reflected in the sort of like players themselves.
Yeah.
The community.
I think that's like a whole other kind of podcast episode, really. It's something I'd love to get into on a really deep level.
Yeah, that is a whole topic, because the industry and games in general are awful to women. Yeah, I would love to talk about that.
Yeah, well, I think we will. I think that's definitely something we'll touch on at another time, because it's fucking disgusting. But yeah,
hopefully with more women.
Yes, that would be great.
I think we need more women on that.
Yeah.
Swap me out for my partner.
Well, yeah, she's a goon, right?
She's a goon and a better games designer than me, anyway.
Didn't want to say, but yeah. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
On a cheerful note
unionisation. That's always fun.
It is improving. It is a lot.
Yeah,
better
no,
than
that's
the
the
UK.
thing that we face the negative that we might change things. The very existence of a union now, which is doing very well, it's growing, it's part of a wider network of existing tech unions. I think it's going to be a massive benefit, and I think the cases are going to start being made. Things like gender and racial balance within games, that's obviously difficult, because just for where we are, and it's one of those things where you might make things worse by trying to make things better. But yeah, we're talking about it. I am so white and middle class, so maybe I should just stop. I don't know. Yeah. Games unionisation. Yeah. Look into it.
Yeah, we are getting
it's
there.
Wonderful.
I think
Unions
it's also
for everything.
Considering we're talking about unionisation in the games industry, I think we should also highlight what's going on at Kickstarter because it is very much games adjacent.
Which is basically games.
Wild.
So Kickstarter, as you may well know, is a crowdfunding kind of platform. We talked about crowdfunding earlier. Kickstarter is kind of the main platform for crowdfunding video games. Kickstarter staff are trying to unionise, have been attempting to unionise, and they... probably a few weeks ago now, they fired their main kind of leaders of this unionisation attempt. Again, as with US2, it's kind of very explicit circumstances, but, you know, this is why this is happening. And, I mean, this is a platform that is designed to promote collective action, to promote people coming together to, you know, help create this, you know, game, movie, whatever, as a group, and it's just kind of fundamentally against kind of the ethos of kind of the platform and the organisation.
Yeah, but it's still owned by capital, so and capital will resist any more power to the workers at all points.
And the excuses that management gives are the same you always hear, where it's, well, we don't need a union because everyone's so nice to each other and we're like a family. And
there is no conflict
We'll
because
set
we're
up
all
our
the
own
same.
internal union, and it'll be great, and we'll organise it, and it'll be more
have
true
one
to the
that we
values
own.
of the company.
And if that was true and everything was so great and they were like a family, they wouldn't have anything to fear from a fucking union, would they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have started one in the first place.
And this happened when I worked in Germany. Some people, so Slack is an intercommunication tool used in the games industry a lot. I don't know if any of you use it, but people in Germany, you don't have unions. You have a thing called a workers' council. It's traditionally done with older steel companies and larger industries. It's essentially the same thing. It makes it very hard to fire people. It puts a lot of actual pressure on working conditions and so on. And some people in the company decided they wanted to form one, and you only need, I think, 3 people to request a workers' council out of an entire company. And they started talking about it on Slack, and they put all of these people, they made a channel on Slack, a private channel, which they didn't realize that if you're an admin on Slack, you can read. And suddenly, management turned up at these people's desks and, well, informed us that we needed to fire these people for performance reasons.
Wow.
We called it Black Wednesday, where basically 7 or 8 people who were some of the best people in the company just got fired and were escorted out of the building and weren't allowed to come back in.
That's awful.
Yeah.
It happens. It is shit. And I'm so glad that, I mean, the current company I work at is entirely pro Games Workers Unite. And like, yep, we support it fully. We think it's brilliant. And it's changing slowly but surely.
And that's encouraging in itself. Yeah. It's a better company that is, you know, confident enough in the way that it's run and, you know, supportive enough of its staff that it will embrace that.
They were 100% supportive of me coming on a podcast to pitch about the games industry.
I mean, they probably won't be after they listen to the podcast. They'll be like, what the fuck were you thinking?
It is funnily, it is indicative of the industry because you feel... I'm entirely supported in doing this. I'm very senior. They're probably not going to find me, but I still feel this slight knot of fear simply just talking about industry stuff in a small public setting for a very old internet comedy forum. Yeah. And you still worry, oh, this might come back on me because there's about 50 people in the games industry, it feels like, at some point.
It's alright. We've only got 600 listeners. It's fine.
Only 600.
Yeah, they're all the employees that were let go from Blizzard.
And it all comes full circle.
Oh, that's done me. That was nice.
Well, it seems like a decent enough jumping off point now, because what's better than games than a game about games.
Ooh.
So Natalie has prepared something up for us that she assures us is not libelous.
Yeah, but it'll be fine, guys. Don't worry. It'll be
I'm
fun.
terrified of this.
I'm
So
excited.
we're about to play a round of Guess the Scandal.
Yeah. So yeah, normally this would be where we do comment or commentariat, but I know we probably could find some really good shit for that. But I put this together with about an hour's notice, so this felt easier. So it's very simple. The idea is that I'm going to read some quotes out. The quotes are corporate responses from video game companies to scandals that they were embroiled in. And your job will be to guess which scandal is being referred to. And don't worry, for those who are not video game fans, we will kind of make the effort to kind of explain the details so that you do not kind of miss out on the jokes and the japes and all
I
that.
won't. You're less than scum.
Right.
That's a good impression of management.
Okay, so let's get started here. I think this one's quite a simple one to kind of get you up to speed, get a feel for it. Number one, we understand and respect that there is a disappointment with the bag in the Power Armor edition. We are sorry.
Oh, come on.
I mean, talk about low-hanging fruit. I mean, come on. That's Fallout.
Wow.
Yeah, that's...
That's the new one, right?
Fallout
Fallout
76.
76.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like a bundle with... I mean, they put pictures out of a quite nice-looking bag, and I believe some review sites might have even got a nice bag.
They did, yes.
As opposed to the sort of disposable IKEA thing that most people got.
Yep, supposed to be
what was it,
canvas
the canvas
bags.
wet
Yeah.
tech duffel bag that was supposed to store the helmet, and they just got some really shitty IKEA bag ripoff instead.
Yeah.
Not-
Yeah,
Did you see the follow-up scandal to that, where because that was the collector's edition with the Power Armor helmet in, but they
It was the follow-up
licensed.
scandal, people then installing the game.
I mean, that's a whole other story.
They licensed some other company to produce a second like wearable Power Armor helmet collectible,
Yeah.
and it turned out to be infested with like deadly mold.
Yeah.
God,
recall
they had to
about
return them all,
20,000
right,
of them.
because they would fucking kill you or something.
I mean, it doesn't sound great putting that airtight looking thing on your head to begin with.
I mean, it's like a
I
true Fallout
believe it
experience. You
wasn't
get
intended
poisoning.
for wear. I'm pretty sure it was just for display. But yes, you are right. This is Bethesda's recent... I am loath to use the word hit, because it wasn't. But this is Fallout 76, the latest game in one of their biggest franchises. Their collector's edition, this is a thing that games often do. AAA games, they put out big, expensive editions for like 200 or so quid, where you can get the game, you get a whole load of other swag as well. The swag's all really kind of cheap and tacky, so the games get lots more money for the game developers. But they advertised a canvas bag. They ended up sending out a whole load of nylon bags instead. But I am happy to report that 6 months later, they managed to arrange a deal, and the people, they got the canvas bags that they were looking for. So everyone is happy and everything is fine.
They were originally given, was it 400 or 500 atoms in game, as opposed to getting the canvas bag, which I think comes to about £3.60 or something. And you couldn't really buy anything with them, even though the canvas bags were supposed to be £20 worth of money. But that's
Collector's
another
edition was $200, by the way.
My favourite
right.
thing about that was that they tried to claim that they couldn't provide the canvas bags because there was a canvas shortage.
Sorry.
Oh my god, right, shit, let's move on. Number two. Number two. Our goal was to let players choose between a utilitarian view of ensuring your bloodline lived on or forming a romantic relationship. We attempted to
I know
distinguish
this.
between the two, but could have done this more carefully as we were walking a narrow line between roleplay choices and story, and the clarity and motivation for this decision was poorly executed.
I know exactly what this is from.
Anybody else want to take a swing?
I'm gonna guess it's
I'm
BioWare.
intrigued, but I don't know
It's not BioWare.
It's not Assassin's Creed, is it?
It is.
Yeah,
Oh,
go on,
It's
take
Assassin's
it,
Creed
Kirby.
Odyssey.
I'm
Assassin's
listing
Creed
the like
Odyssey.
most recent scandals I can think of.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey allows you to pick for the first time ever between being a female character or a male character, but also allows you to be homosexual as your character as well, if you want to go through romance options. And one of their DLCs makes it so that you have to have a child, regardless of what your sexual orientation in the game is. You suddenly have to have a child with somebody, which means you have to then enter into a heterosexual relationship because they needed to continue the bloodline for the character, when the actual game itself doesn't even need bloodlines anymore. They've changed it with Assassin's Creed Origins, so it was a complete baffling decision by Ubisoft to do this. They just decided to take away all agency, all relationship you built up with your character throughout the game, and force you into a relationship that you might not have even started in the game itself. It was weird, and they haven't properly fixed it either. You still have to do that if you want to do the DLC.
Does the DLC start with you escaping from a special camp?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's bad.
Do you shank a pastor on your way out or something?
It is just distressing. It's distressing because they built up a load of goodwill with it, and they'd had a really great character in I can't remember her name now.
Cassandra,
yeah, Cassandra.
She's amazing.
It's just fantastic. And then having to suddenly force you to do something that your character might not have done over 800 hours, however long you've been playing it for.
It's a long game.
Because there's so much content, you know.
It didn't matter if you rebuffed them the whole time, you said no to them all the time, remember? And you still then settled down and had a nice little nuclear family with them.
Yeah. Just weird.
Yeah. Right,
Video games.
Yeah.
before we do the next one, I just want to highlight a couple of scandals which I thought were worth mentioning, but I could not find good quotes.
Honourable mentions.
Yeah, honourable mentions. First one goes to Mortal Kombat 11. Obviously a huge franchise, the best selling of the franchise so far as well for that game. This is a game with very bloody fatalities. Games developers literally got PTSD from researching gruesome deaths and grisly murders and such, so that they could make the fatalities in that game. Like, giving themselves mental health issues for our benefit. So that's a joy. Not. And the other one, which... This is Activision of Activision Blizzard. They show up again. They have been tracking when their workers have sex using the health app Ovia.
What? What?
So yeah, this is Ovia. It's kind of a fertility app, essentially, is my understanding, to help couples who are looking to have babies, procreate at the most opportune times. But as many companies have these days, these occupational health programs, Activision have one. They are kind of related to Ovia. I believe it's part of the health contract. So they're able to access the data on when their employees are shagging.
Oh
Jesus
my
Christ.
days. How is that not illegal?
I know.
Sure it is.
I know.
I mean, USA, I suppose. You tick the box on the terms and conditions, so you're fucked.
Yeah,
It's not
this is
illegal
why.
because America's not even a real country.
I'm sorry, the whiskey is getting opened.
Is it only American employees, or is it?
I don't
anyone
know. This was a long time ago, and I did not kind of fully go back to the story.
That is horrific.
Yeah, it's bad.
I mean, the games industry does love data.
Big data.
Anyway, let's get on to our next actual entry. So number 3. I've been in the industry long enough to remember when players weren't complete asshats to developers, and it was pretty neat. I forged a bunch of long-lasting relationships from back then, Would be awesome to get back there and not engage with toxic people or asking how high when a mob screams jump is hopefully a start.
I mean, you gave it away when you said asshats, but I'll let someone else take that one.
That was,
who was this now?
that was Apex Legends, wasn't it?
Yep.
Oh yeah, so that'd be Respawn.
Yeah.
For the record, I support that guy. I've seen the way people carry on when they're talking to developers. So
I agree.
It's rough.
But this is what happens when you don't set ethical monetization standards at the start of your project, because Apex Legends came out with a load of videos saying we were going to be really, really good, and we're going to do this, and we're going to make it so you can earn everything without paying, and then they missed all of their fucking targets, and they didn't have standards to fall back on to say, no, we will not do triple nested gacha bullshit and $130 axe, and so Season 2 comes around, $130 axe and a shit ton of gacha, kompu gacha, which is combined gacha. When you get all the gacha, you can get something else afterwards, which is the axe. And guess what? A shitstorm.
I think I'm going to have to rule that we can't say gacha anymore.
they absolutely deserve flack for the whole scandal, but I do entirely agree with that guy that people just take the fucking piss when they're do you know what I mean? It's it's fine to complain about something, but to just the way gamers carry on when they sense blood in the water is just.
The toxicity is endemic in the whole industry. It's a real problem.
I want to kind of make a counterpoint to this at the same time. You are going into a free-to-play kind of market. You understand how that market works. You understand that the majority of the people who are playing your game are not going to be paying for that service. You know that you're going to essentially be kind of getting your money from a few whales who are kind of the big spenders. So I think
it's 10% putting any money in and 1% of whales. Really make it.
So I think to a certain level you are kind of disrespecting the fact that you've chosen to have this relationship. You've chosen to kind of work in a marketplace where most of the people playing your game are going to be expecting it to be free. So I think you do kind of lose a certain amount of kind of the high ground at that point if you turn around and start calling them asshats. Obviously, the mob response could be quite excessive, but that's
there's
kind
a professionalism that you shouldn't.
That's two different quotes though, wasn't it? Because at one point they said people were being asshats, but they also said that most people who played the game were freeloaders.
That's true. Yes, that is true.
Yeah, that's not great.
Yeah.
But the thing was, it was most of the people who play the game are freeloaders, and we love that. So they clearly weren't intending it to be a derogatory term. But I mean, obviously,
it's very easy to lose context.
The worst phrase I've heard.
It's not the best phrase, but it's not. There are worse ways they could have put that.
This is a phrase that gets bandied about in the games industry a lot. You guys know about whales. You hear this all the damn time. Well, you can't have whales without krill.
No.
Yeah.
Not sure how I feel about that.
It makes my skin crawl.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Oh. Anyway, let's move on to the final one, last one of this wonderful game we've had. It's a bit of a long one, so bear with me. The attacks made by my former friend and colleague have no basis in reality or law. He is simply trying to shake me down for money. We will win, but because lawsuits are pending, I can't comment as much as I'd like. I am shocked by his lies. Thanks for your love and support. As a father, I find crimes against children to be especially repugnant. It is very painful that a former friend and colleague would lie to try to associate me with such vile behaviour in his own greedy pursuit of money. As the day progresses, I am discovering who my friends are. Thank you for your love and support. I am going to try to focus on my work and trust that truth and justice will prevail with the courts.
I think that was Macho Man Randy Savage on Hulk Hogan, wasn't it?
You're close. You're close.
Very close. I mean, it's our boy Jim Sterling's favourite games developer. That is... Anyone else?
Someone would say it.
Randy Pitchford, like I said.
You got it.
It is our boy Randy Pitchford. Jesus Christ.
Is that him talking about...
Why would you fuck me on this?
Is that him talking about the voice of Claptrap?
No, but
That's,
yeah. But
that was
I'm not sure that was the particular one. There was an issue with him as well.
I mean, Randy Pitchford could and maybe will fill an entire podcast all by himself. This specific Randy Pitchford scandal is related to him being sued by, I believe it was one of the former lawyers for Gearbox, which is the games company he's CEO of, because he had taken $12 million of the company's money for his own personal use.
It was just resting in his account.
He was going to give it back. But
that lawsuit went places, didn't it?
Yes, this is... you might have noticed there was a bit of a weird segue there, where he started talking about kids. So the reason that he did that was involved in this lawsuit was an accusation, and I have to use the word allegedly at this point, that Randy Pitchford allegedly had a whole lot of child porn on his servers or laptop or computer, and he had a private movie room where allegedly he would show this child porn. And when I say child porn, I don't mean kind of, young, kind of, we're talking just under the age of legal, but obviously still very illegal. But he would show these movies of child pornography to friends and colleagues. And apparently,
Yikes.
when challenged on why he had and kept such material, his response was that the girls in this movies were squirting, and he wanted to figure out how it was done because it was clearly a magic trick.
What?
Randy Pitchford is an open magician.
That was the that's again.
He's
that's two
queuing up
different-
for his time on Penn and Teller's bullshit.
It's two different stories there, because there was an accusation about him having incredibly shady parties at his house, but the squirting porn was he left that on a memory stick. There was a video of a girl who I think was just barely legal, and there was that video and also sensitive financial documents, and he left it in a medieval times restaurant.
Because of course you fucking do. Jesus Christ, people are the worst.
But that was the one where he claimed that his interest in the video was purely professional as a magician.
Wow. What a defence.
I mean, I'm convinced. Give the man more money. Yeah,
It was the long con, obviously.
fucking hell.
On that note, we should probably wrap this up. I don't think we're kind of going
It's only been
anywhere
an hour
after
and a
that.
half.
Yeah. that's a
It's
decent amount.
been productive. We're getting somewhere. So yeah, thanks guys, and thanks also to David, who's going to be editing this later. I know he's got a lot on his plate at the minute, so we appreciate it.
Consecutive podcast recording going on at the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're doing 2-in-1 for you fine folks, so appreciate it, please.
And it's
Which is also
free,
the
it's
file
not
name of that thing
DLC.
that on Randy's stick.
And follow us on Twitter. I don't remember the Twitter handle. Somebody else say it.
Praxiscast.com, not.com. You know what? I'm going to check now. I'm pretty sure it's Praxiscast. David, please edit this.
Yes,
No,
it's
don't.
at
This is
Praxiscast.
beautiful
Yeah,
content.
right.
Praxis card.
Praxis cast, yeah.
You know what? It's Praxis. You know how to use search. Come on.
To be fair, there is actually another podcast that is just called Praxis, which is, I believe, Christian related. So clearly on our remit.
I've got to say though, that's probably like one of the best self promotions I've ever heard, which is just oh fuck it, you can use search. We're not that hard to
Just
find.
Google,
I mean,
figure it
yeah.
out. If you're listening to this, you already know where we are.
You don't see the word praxis much.
Anyone have any Twitters or anything they want to plug, by the way?
Yeah, so I'm on XJMAW.
You can't find me on Twitter because I'm in the games industry and therefore have no social media presence.
Same.
I'm Geordie Goblin on Twitter.
I'm not on Twitter because I have a life.
High five.
No, I don't have Twitter either. I'm too busy with other places.
Yeah, so what's left other than to just sort of taper off disappointingly?
I mean, it's what we do.
Not much to make.
Bye!
Bye.
Bye!
Bye-bye.
Love you!